Hello, everybody. My name's Milan Starcic. Welcome to Freedom Rising, a podcast dedicated to empowering individuals on the journey to personal growth, lasting serenity, and freedom from addiction. Tune in and join the movement. Your journey to freedom starts here. We neither represent, promote, or demote any 12-step program or organization. We are merely souls on the path of recovery with the desire to expand our lives and experiences and share them with you. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 111th Recovery Freedom Rising podcast. I'm Milan Starcic with co-host Scotty N. and Kyle P. That's right. We've never had this combo on here before, and I'm looking forward to today. Thanks for coming, brothers. I love you guys.
Thanks for having me.
Today's topic is the immense topic of resentments. Scotty, would you be willing to share on this topic and why you were happy to come here and discuss this today?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So I think resentments are a really big part of something that we carry into our recovery. I know that I used the resentments that I had quite often as reasons to use, right? My life was this, my parents were that, uh, things I felt wronged by, or how life had done me wrong, and how that contributed very heavily to my using. And I think it's a really big hurdle a lot of people have coming in, where they f- they hear we have to let that shit go, and it's not easy, right? So it's kind of like I don't know, it's just a really big part of recovery, I think, is letting go of those resentments and learning how not to get new ones. So I'm happy to come here today and talk about it.
Yay. And Mr. Kyle Petty, would you like to say why you were happy to come talk about resentments and what they are to you?
I sure can. Good morning, everyone. I am an addict named Kyle, and I can totally agree with Scotty. I know for myself when I came in, I brought a lot of resentments with me, and it was one of the main reasons I couldn't stick around. I didn't want to let those go, and quite a few of those resentments turned into what I call reservations because I didn't want to let them go. So if those resentments came around, I used them as an excuse to go and get high and go use. And, um, it had sent me back out 6 times in the past and, setting expectations for myself, setting expectations for others. And, you know, expectations lead to future, resentments. And I learned that in the program and
Mhm.
I hear it quite a bit. And, you know, I, uh, I had to get honest, I had to do a solid set of steps and an honest set of steps, and I had to dig deep and find out what all those resentments were and let them go. And now I can catch those resentments with step 10 and doing them more every day, and that helps me to not let those take control of my life anymore. So I'm really happy I got to come on here and share about resentments because they can be dangerous in recovery.
Awesome. I love you
Very
guys.
dangerous.
And, resentments for me were entirely my source of disturbance. But in active addiction, I was like emotionally amplifying my resentments in order to enable my using.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
I was madder than I needed to be, so I could go on a bender of revenge. I was sadder than I needed to be because that was a like excuse for a great pity party. A woe is me, you know. And then I celebrated everything like it was the end of the world. Like it was like, whoa, Kyle's got a birthday, Scotty's got a birthday. That's like a 3-day bender for me twice this week, with 24 hours of sleep in the middle. Like it really was. And it wasn't, and then when I was starting my first step four, that was kind of my introduction to the tools this program offers of doing this moral inventory and getting rid of these resentments. And it was, I expected that I was going to look at these resentments so clearly that I would know exactly how I was wronged, you know? And, and it turned out that, you know, with these wonderful tools that this program offers with the steps, that I actually got to see my part in everything. And you know, and I think that really like one of the fundamental things about this program is us learning that, you know, there isn't a problem with the world. There's a problem with how we accept and receive the world through our perceptions. And being able to see our part in that, having that awareness of the tools of the steps was my only path to freedom from there, you know? It really, like, without actually seeing how I was the one causing most of my pain, I had no way to fix that. I just kept piling up the blame on external things instead of looking inward. And so anyway, when Mr. Baron Vaughn's Boots here was asking us to do this topic, I was like, this is a great topic because there's so much in it, you know, and resentments are really so much of what keeps us sick. So, Scotty, would you like to ask Kyle a question or a topic or whatever it is you got for us?
Okay. So this was a big one for me, and uh, my wife is in the program, and she's been working through her step 8. So it was the first thing that came to mind when I was thinking of topics. But how do you navigate? I guess it's tricky to word, but how do you navigate making amends to people that you have resentments against?
You're just like throwing us in a deep fryer this morning. I love
Shots
it.
fired. You know, that's a good one, Scotty. I've done a few sets of steps in the last 16 years, and I learned the hard way. You know, I learned that if I had resentments against somebody and it was going to cause harm to me or the other person, you know, I didn't learn this until it was too late, and I had a few amends go sideways. Um, I tried to make amends to two people that I had resentments against, and that did me wrong in active addiction, and I tried to make those amends in recovery, and I couldn't let it go what they did to me, but I still had to make an amends to them to clear my side of the street, and it didn't go so well. It was more of a blame game than an apology, and it ended up sending me back out. And um, when I came back in 2014 and I got honest, I learned that we make amends where we won't cause harm to ourselves or others. And I there's still amends that I could probably make, but they might cause harm to myself still and to the other person. So, when I did my step 8, I had, 3 categories, and it was absolute amends, maybe amends, and no, they're going to cause more harm. And, there's still quite a few in that last column because, I did a lot of damage in active addiction, and, I still have, I guess, I don't know if I call them resentments, I still, I'll call it trust issues, with some people. And, I don't know where I stand with those people because I don't talk to them anymore. When I came into the program, I had to change one thing, and that was everything. And especially the people. So, there's those people that I don't talk to anymore. And, I've accepted it and I've moved on. And, it's working. So hopefully that answered that question.
Mhm.
I love that. Could I please get the question again, Baron?
Okay, so how do you navigate making amends with people that you have resentments against?
Well,
Or
I'm not saying this because we fight a lot, but I'm saying it that I would say the most occurrences happen with my wife on this,
Mm.
Mhm.
and it's because I interact with her more than any other single person in the world, not because we're, terrible at getting along. I'm actually kind of surprised at how amazing our relationship can be after all the turmoil that I've charged and where we're at. But, quite often I can see a situation happening. I might, she might be getting mad through it. I might be getting mad through it. Or one of us is feeling misunderstood. But there's like a resentment building on either one or both of our sides.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it generally takes me withdrawing, and quite often like recentering myself, like, from I break up my day, like I've said a lot, with walking. And so it's like, man, I'll go out
Mhm.
for a walk with the dogs or by myself, and on those walks, I usually pray on those walks now. Like, it's I'm in the middle of ridiculously beautiful nature, and I get like the opportunity to kind of recenter myself. So by the time I'm coming back from the walk, I know I've already like, done a quick step 10 on myself in it.
Mhm.
And whether I think that everything she did is awesome or not, I try to sweep my side of the street by the time I get home.
Mhm.
Some days
Mhm.
the most I can do is text it, and other days I'll wait and talk about it. But if I'm not feeling strong enough on twisting it around to be like well, I did this because of that, but I'm sorry for my part. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, if
Mhm.
I'm flipping that blame back around, then I'm going to do it in a text where it just says my part, because
Mhm.
at least I can get that out without being a little baby. It's true though. Like, I mean, I'd
Mhm.
love to be freaking perfect, but but that's just
Mhm.
not in the cards, man. And what about yourself, Senior Von Boots?
Um, I left a message for you in the chat real quick. Hold on.
Okay. Yep.
Um, so what comes to my mind when I think about this is some of the resentments I had coming into the fellowship and coming, not just fellowship, I mean recovery. I've shared this before. I had a little bit of time and then relapsed, and now I have my time that I have now. And the time that I have now, the big resentments I had, like the main shit that was bothering me resentments wise, was my parents. Um, I really did them wrong in ways, but they did me wrong in some ways too. Uh, Especially my dad, I can recognize. So when it comes to when it came to that, I realized that um, I had to deal with those resentments pretty much before I could make a true amends. And my approach went from one of, I guess, like righteous indignation almost, and like just being like, I'm never letting this shit go. This is fucked up, to more of a level of understanding and sympathy and empathy, right? And I can use my dad as an example in that he was a practicing alcoholic most of my life. So I had some deep-seated resentment, and I think I shared this on the previous podcast too, but I wrote a letter to my dad forgiving him for things, right? Like, do you remember when you did this? This is how it made me feel. I forgive you. And one of my friends in recovery was I was talking to one of my friends in recovery uh about it, and why don't you write a letter talking about asking forgiveness for the things that you've done, right? So in doing that, I started to like it changed my perspective. And what I realized was I looked at his upbringing, I looked at his history, and I realized that he was ill-equipped, and he came from an alcoholic home, right? So there was learned behavior, there's genetic behavior, there's all sorts of things. So I was able to lessen that resentment, then seek forgiveness, and allow myself to clean my side of the street, uh, as as we often say. So for me, I think for me, in order to make a true amends to somebody, I have to uh, let go of the resentment first. And like Kyle was saying, if I don't let go of the resentment, then is my amend a true amend? That's where I
Ooh.
am.
Love that. Okay, Mr. Senior Wheelman, we've got here. That was recommended by Baron von Boots. He's like, his name should be Wheelman. And it should be like your wheels front and center. It's like, I agree. Wheelman, we'll call you WM.
Is that because I'm always driving?
Yeah,
They,
do you have a question for me, Wheelman?
I do. Um, so seeing as that previous podcast we did on expectations, I would like to ask the question of, have you ever set expectations for yourself or someone else in recovery that has led to a resentment?
Poof. A kabillion times. But, um, it's funny. I would say the very first example of that was like leaving the treatment center and somehow having this hope that we were all going to stay straight. Like
mm,
everybody talks a great game in group and at their graduations and when they're about to leave and then it was like, man, the first time a friend of mine from our group relapsed, I was almost crying for 3 days. Like it just and it wasn't so my resentment wasn't anger, it was sadness.
mm,
It was I was like, holy shit, man,
mm,
he's gonna die. Like and so, first off, that was my very first example of that. And then, I think that that one is one that like occurs in some minute amount with all my friends in recovery. Like I want success for everybody. And I think that, um, me watching them heal and being part of that kind of rebirth and that growth process. Part of my heart is invested in that. And when they do relapse, man, it's just like it can't help but hurt. And
mhm,
and if I was truly without an expectation, I would be able to be in a state of neutrality about it. So to me, it shows that, like I'm still creating some sort of expectation of people making it or try. I don't know what it is. It's like, it's not that I feel like I'm definitely not angry about it, but it's a sadness, resentment.
mm,
And that's definitely based on
mm,
expectation. So yeah, I'm gonna
mhm.
leave that one there, and I love you guys. It's good to be here today, there, Baron and Wheelman.
I like it.
Okay, so now
Well,
you gotta
not
ask
hey.
Scotty.
Scotty, have you set an expectation on yourself or someone else in recovery that led to a resentment?
hmm hmm Both on self and others. I can say confidently that I've repeatedly in my recovery, I've set personal expectations high enough that I would never reach them and
Mhm.
would um, inevitably fail and then be mad at myself. But one of the things that comes to mind, the big thing that comes to mind, is and I've got a story with this one. So um, when I my first NA sponsor was a traditions Nazi, as they're called, and he really he really stressed the importance of traditions, but to a point that was a bit overzealous, right? It was like it got to the point where it wasn't helping anybody. But for an early phase of my recovery, I was in the same camp as he was. It's taken me a long time to get out of it. Um, but so on that, um, I had an expectation that people who were around the program for a long time, old timers, right, that they would act or behave in a certain way within NA meetings, especially like there's a particular example I can think of. So we had a gentleman coming around, and he multi-fellowshipped, right? So during his shares, he would uh, talk about other fellowships and about how the tagline he always said was, I'm so fucked up I need every A there is. And where I was coming from of the camp of the traditions Nazi, it was like he should at his time, right, be more respectful of NA's traditions and not talk about alcoholism and not talk about this or talk about that instead, that kind of thing. And I actually ended up embarrassing him in one of our meetings because I was chairing the meeting, right? And he had a habit of cross talking, like deliberate, straight up cross talking, which I thought was a no no.
I
And I
hate
thought, right, but I was saying that he should have known better because he had time. So he started his share with uh, I forget the woman's name, but he said her name and said this is exactly like so as if he was basically sniper sharing and just sharing at them exactly what.
sniper sharing. Ooh, I like that.
uh, and I said, I mean, his name was Mike. Anyway, I said, Mike, we don't share like that here. We don't crosstalk. And he looks at me and he goes, well, then I have nothing to say. And he got up and he stormed out of the meeting. But he forgot his keys on the table. So he's outside for a few minutes and then he comes inside and has to walk. It was a really weirdly shaped room. So he had to do like walk along the entire meeting to get his keys to then walk out again.
Pissy
Right?
walk of shame.
Yeah. So whether or not that was justified, I don't, I'm not going to judge that. But I, I've where I sit today is um, people. I where I sit today, I see where he's coming from today, right? And even though I still disagree with that type of sharing and that kind of stuff, it's not. I'm not the NA police, right? I'm not here to make sure everybody gets all the language right, doesn't say or says drug names specifically instead of DOC. Like people got to share whatever they got to share to stay clean. Now, I know I still have a problem with like sniper sharing like that, but anyway. So the point is I let that resentment grow for a long time, and finally I acted out on it. And in all honesty, I haven't seen him around very much anymore to make an amends. I'm not going to go to another fellowship to track him down, but if I do see him at an A meeting, I would say. And I mean, and just a little an aside to that is how uh, he didn't have an easy 34 years, right? And I won't say his story because anonymity reasons, Well, he had some tough shit go down in his time, so I just am happy that he's still clean, right?
Mhm.
Because
Absolutely.
I would feel terrible with him. So it really, looking back, that was a pivotal moment in my recovery, even though I didn't realize it at the time. And Milan, I just want to say one more thing, and this is just related to your share a little bit.
Mm.
I really
Cross
like what you're
talking's
talking.
allowed here.
I know, I know, right? But I really like how you said there's a sadness, resentment. I'd never heard that before, and it makes a lot of sense. And so I appreciate that. And I can unfortunately tell you that it never gets easier.
Yeah, I honestly don't
When
think it will the more my heart opens.
no,
No.
Yeah,
in fact, it gets harder
yeah,
when you see people come in and struggle, or come in and do well and then struggle. Like I wish I could just take somebody and beat them over the head with a basic text and they would get recovery.
yeah.
But that's
You're
but
living clean.
you know, so but
Yeah, you're fucking awesome, Scotty. Okay, Mr. Wheelman, can you ask yourself the same question?
I can. And I can also say I wanted to throw a basic text at somebody also.
recover now, motherfucker.
From across the room. um, yeah, if I had any expectations put on myself or others that have formed a resentment, I can honestly say I can relate to what you both said because it's me too. Um, when I went through treatment in 2014, there was a guy in there who lived in Sylvan Lake, and we got real close because we did a 6 week program together, and then we did an additional 6 weeks of CBT. So we really got to know each other on all levels, and it was it almost by the end felt like we had known each other like our whole life. And he asked me to speak and give him his certificate at his graduation. He got out a week before I did. And the day after he got out, he got a phone call from his mom and dad. And he wasn't even out 12 hours and he relapsed and overdosed and passed away. And, I had set an expectation on him that he was going to recover, like the way that he talked and the way that, he walked the walk in the treatment center. And, he had told me his relapse prevention, he had told me all this, but the one thing that we didn't know, he had wrote a letter to his parents, and it was essentially a suicide letter. And, he had a reservation. And, that reservation was broke down in that letter to his parents that, you know, he wasn't there for himself. He was there for his parents. And, that one hurt. But I'm beyond grateful that it happened while I was in the treatment center and I had all that support there because I don't know if I can say that I'd still be sitting here if that would have happened to me, a week after being out of the treatment center and I got that phone call from somebody's parents. That could have been my end all be all. But I had the counselor's support. We were going to a meeting that night in Red Deer, or no, sorry, in Lacombe. And, I was able to share about it and I was able to, be able to talk to other addicts. And, that was the best thing that could have happened and the best outcome for that situation. But then on the other hand, I've set expectations for myself. And, Scotty, you nailed it. I am bad for setting the bar too high for myself that I can't reach the bar. I can't even jump and grab it. And, I'm kind of going through that right now. Wednesday will be 10.5 years, and I set an expectation for myself. I did a 5-year plan, I did a 10-year plan with my sponsor when I came in, and my 10-year plan was to be debt free. And I ain't there. I ain't there. I went backwards. I went backwards. I lost my dad in 2022, like you guys both know. March 22, I lost my dad. November 22, I went through a divorce. That set me way back. And recently, I helped out someone who I thought was my friend that burned me severely financially. And it's coming down to a possible repossession of a vehicle that's in my name that this guy blew up, and I don't have the money for. And other areas like creditors, stuff like that, that have built up since the divorce. And um possibly looking at selling my house to pay off this debt. And that house was something that I made in my 5-year plan. Came into the program with nothing, and I made a plan with my sponsor on how to achieve it. And, I was able to purchase this house at 3 years clean. And, now looking back on it, it's like, I worked so hard for that goal, and now I got to essentially sell it because I set the bar too high for myself. But, you know, the beautiful thing about Narcotics Anonymous is I don't need to use over it. What Narcotics Anonymous has taught me is I'm allowed to lower that bar. I can set smaller goals to achieve that big goal. And, you know, sell the house, let the bank come take the truck. I don't have to use over those things, and I can start with a clean slate, just like I did when I came in with 0 days clean. Just because I'm starting back at square one don't mean I lost my clean time. It don't mean I relapsed. Life happens, and I've been doing a lot of work and a lot of self-reflection the last couple of weeks with a lot of help from my close family and my girlfriend and my sponsor and recovering addicts. And I can probably I wouldn't be being honest if I said I didn't think about using over it, but I don't have to. It's crossed my mind. I'm an addict. It's a disease I'm going to have for the rest of my life. But I waited too long to talk about it because of the pride, and I still have an ego. It's just not as big. But I don't like calling it that ego. I just have pride for myself and the life that I've created. And I sat in it too long before I talked about it, and it became a resentment. And I started to beat myself up over it. And I did. You're gonna laugh. I did exactly the opposite of what my dad told me to do. My dad told me, don't buy these things. Don't, you don't need the payments. You don't need this, because he went through it. He did that. And I had to fucking learn the hard way.
Yeah.
I went and did it. And now I'm facing the consequences. And he was right. But the problem was I sat in this so long, beat myself up over it, but I felt like I let my dad down. And it yeah, I might have let him down, because I didn't listen. But what I've learned in this program is I can face the consequences, and I can make the change. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So, there's a lot of gratitude around this right now. And a big, big, big life lesson. So I'm, yeah, never thought I'd say those words, but I did.
Man, Kyle, I came into my recovery just financially tragic, and it's been nothing but kind of a downhill slide to the depths of the edge of losing our place in everything I ever worked for. And man, I feel for you. And, I'm kind of just got to a sell off everything point, and I'm, two out of four things gone, and 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 I'm still going to be in debt at the end of it, even selling everything. But it's just like, man, the freedom that's coming from not having like the additional thing and the additional thing and the additional thing. Like, even if I've got to start my life all over again, I had a house burned down when I was 25. I lost everything, no insurance, everything. And one of the things that taught me is I can rebuild my life from nothing. And
Oh
you
yeah,
know what? Sometimes it's better to start with nothing than the chains of the past.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Like as much as it hurts, because we literally create expectations of what's going to happen if we do this and what's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
if we do that. And guess what? This is what happens when we make a bad decision. Like,
Yeah. I'm gonna comment on that real quick, Milan,
yeah,
because that's
yeah,
that's where I'm at right now. Because that's where this resentment is coming from. Because I have all these payments and I have all this stuff, and the freedom's not there anymore. The freedom that I gained in recovery is no longer there. I feel like a prisoner to the banks. I feel like a prisoner to the lenders, the creditors. There's no more freedom there, and that's the point that it got to me that caused this one resentment was, you know, just sell off everything, start with a clean slate and get that freedom back,
yeah.
not have people and, these phone calls like, you owe us this, you owe us that. Like, where's the freedom in that?
Here's the
And that,
four things you need, dude: your family, your dog, shelter, and food. And like all the other shit is the chains holding us down.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog, like, dog is kind of family, but like, we still got our moms, so we got to say family first.
absolutely.
Okie dokie. Baron, are you ready for a question?
I am.
Resentments are heavy chains that bind us to old pain. Recovery teaches us that freedom begins when we choose to let go. Question: what resentment are you still carrying that might be weighing down your spirit today?
Mm. Mm. Let's do this good.
Let's just get into the nitty gritty of the insides of our souls.
I'd say myself. I
Ooh,
think
wee.
I um definitely myself. Like, not every day. I don't hate myself every day, but I still have some problems with self. Um, and I mean, it's morphed and changed over time. So I don't resent myself to the same degree today that I did when I came in, right? Because I was pretty low when I came in. Um, I've done a lot of things that I'm proud of. I've Life has been good to me in many ways, and I've learned about gratitude, right? Like how the wheelman mentioned gratitude,
No real
and
man.
um, so I'm diagnosed schizophrenic, right? And there's a high probability that if I didn't use that switch wouldn't have gotten flipped in my brain, that I wouldn't be. So when I practice gratitude, um, there's actually a really good interview about it between Stephen Colbert and Anderson Cooper. And Colbert talks about um, So Colbert, when he was a child, lost his father and two of his oldest brothers in like a plane accident or a car crash or something. And he's in talking about that, he's like, you have to be grateful for the things you wish never happened.
Yeah.
So when I where I am with gratitude today is trying to be grateful for being schizophrenic sometimes, which is like it's a rocky road. It's good and there's bad. But for a long time, I really was weighed down by the idea that it's my fault. Um, and the biggest way I've overcome that resentment is recognizing that it doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's about what I do with it, right? It doesn't matter whose fault I'm an addict. It matters what I do with my recovery. So I think that's my answer.
I love that. Okay, real man. Resentments are heavy chains that bind us to old pain. Recovery teaches us that freedom begins when we choose to let go. What resentments or what resentment are you still carrying that might be weighing down your spirit today?
You always got the loaded questions, eh? The ones that
Oh
come.
yeah, I want you digging deep. I would say, hey man, pull your pants down. Let's see what you got.
Yeah, the questions that call me the hell out. Yeah. Um, I'm gonna tie it right back into that last answer that I gave, and it's my biggest resentment today is myself. Um, Mainly because they're not taking people's advice and now learning the hard way. Um, you know, if I would have just listened to that advice from the biggest role model in my life, I probably wouldn't be in the situation I'm in today. Um, but like I just mentioned, the gratitude around it. Having an attitude of gratitude is a choice I make daily. Um,
Hmm. Amen.
that is huge in my life. Um, it allows me to stay out of the negativity. It allows me to, be more positive, and it's just overall, a better choice for me. And it's like I can look at all the negatives in this life lesson that I'm getting right now. Um, because there's quite a few negatives. But I can also look at the positives because we just talked about it. It's gonna get me that freedom back. You know, it's gonna take the stress away. And that is what I'm grateful for. And um, I'm grateful that I'm getting this lesson now rather than say another 10 years down the road when I've got a family of my own and I'm more established and then I start losing things. I'm
Hmm.
glad this situation happened while I was still single and you know recently in a new relationship who this person is extremely supportive and standing by my side, and I couldn't be more grateful for that. It's definitely
Hmm.
not their baggage to carry, but they're willing to
Hmm.
grab a handle and help me carry the bag, and I'll be forever grateful for that. And um, it allows me to work around these situations to not allow them to happen in the future, and to have this resentment all over again. So that's my answer.
Love it. Love you guys. Grateful to be here this morning with both of you. I'm enjoying this. Every time one of you guys answers, it's kind of like sending me inward on some similar vein. Like I think for most of us, it's ourself. Like
Hmm.
ourself is definitely and so resentments are heavy chains that bind us to old pain. Recovery teaches us that freedom begins when we choose to let go. What resentment are you still carrying that might be weighing down your spirit today? And I think I might have mentioned this the other week, but One of the speaker tapes I recently listened to, the guy was talking, he was in his 30s years of recovery. And not that that
Mhm.
matters, but what it does matter is that in him, he was talking about doing a step 4 on beliefs. And he said
Mhm.
that he had been in the program like over 20 years, I think, before someone showed him to do one like that. And he said that, he wasn't experiencing, as much freedom as he felt like he should have from his other step 4s. And part of what that was these beliefs that were echoing in, his head, like, he's unattractive, people won't like him. If you knew who he really was, you wouldn't like him. And there's the list goes on and on of like strange little beliefs that we repeat to ourselves that we might have heard when we were kids. And I'd say me, for sure I do. Like I can't
Mhm.
speak for any of you guys, but I certainly know that those pointed labels from when I was a kid, I can still remember who said them to me, where I was standing when I felt like shit from that. And, and unfortunately, those echoes are me propagating that lie inside myself,
Mhm.
and so for myself, there's a pile surrounding that, and that's my goal is here before the end of August to do step 4 on my beliefs, so that I
Mhm.
can take another chip out of something,
Mhm.
because that I feel like a man. I the other step 4s I did a pretty thorough job. Like I did a lot of pages. I did all the stuff I could think of, but I never thought to be thinking about my beliefs. And and
Mm-hmm.
and, and I know for sure there's so much self-deprecation that's coming out of those. That
Mhm.
it's just like insulting myself before I even have the chance to give myself a chance on something.
Mhm.
And so yeah, for me that's just a way that I want to fight the resentments against myself. And yeah,
Mhm.
I was almost thinking of actually starting like an online step group just for a step 4 on beliefs, you know,
Mhm.
like meeting once a week and just talking, because I think that these lies are so embedded. I won't even be able to think of them all, but I know that in a
Mhm.
discussion format with other guys,
Yeah.
it would help us all have more.
No,
Anyway, it's something I'm thinking about. If you guys potentially be interested, we could find some, it'd be an hour and just be like, hey, man, what'd you come up with? Where are you at with it? And yeah, anyway,
Mhm.
uh,
that's something that was sitting inside me. Mr. Avon Boots, do you have another question?
All right, so you guys all know, know me well enough to know a little about. I'm a quotes and sayings guy, right?
Oh,
I love different shit like that. So first, I just want to get two things out of the way, and then I'll go to my question, my topic.
yeah.
One was, there's a saying that came to mind when Wheelman was speaking. Um, maybe
WM?
Mad Max, maybe Mad Max would be better. But anyway, um, with gratitude, optimism is sustainable. Gratitude's huge for me too, and that's from Michael J. Fox. That's from Michael J. Fox when he's in. That's like recent quote where where but like where he has um because he has Parkinson's, right? So
Yeah.
he's sitting on his couch and he can't control his body, and that's what he says. And it was an amazing thing. The other thing was something that Milan struck me. So I'm doing a set of steps through a book called The Gentle Path of the 12 Steps.
Mhm.
And it asks some really interesting questions. And this is a prompt I would throw out for you to do, Milan, if
Okay,
you if
I'm going to
you
write
if you
this
think.
down.
But so you would write 5 sentences, okay,
Yep.
minimum. Each sentence is going to start the same way, and I'll give you the prompt.
Okay.
Okay. The prompt is I'm only lovable if.
Ooh. Whoa, yeah, I like that.
Because when I did, that was a turning point for me in doing this book where I was like, oh shit, it's onto something.
That
You know
will
what I mean?
dispel a pile of lies right there.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Okay, so I have a quote for my next uh, topic.
Okay.
So I've never heard of who said this, but he said the worst resentment that anybody can have is the one you feel justified to keep. So did you, the justification come into your resentments? And if
Okay,
so, can
Mad
you
Max, the wheelman. You got to discuss on that for a minute. Wait, what are you thinking about that? That's like a kick right in the balls.
That is a kick in the balls.
A Monday morning ball knocker.
Yeah, literally.
I love Mondays. Mondays are the fun days.
I don't.
Um,
I'm gonna answer it this way. I'm a fucking addict. I justified everything. You know,
yeah.
I had every excuse in the book. Um, I justified literally everything in life, and especially in addiction. Um, so when it came to holding a resentment, you can best believe that I thought it through real hard and real thorough on why I should keep it and why I shouldn't get rid of it.
Mhm.
And um, that pretty well happened with all of my resentments. And it's funny that you asked that question because when it came to doing my step 4 in the treatment center, when I went to write out my resentments, my list was real short on the resentment side. And um, you know, I the thing I liked about this treatment center I went to was it was at the time that I went through it, the counselors were, recovering addicts with 25 plus years clean. And,
Mhm.
you know, so we know what that means. I got called on my bullshit.
I love it.
Yeah, yeah.
Write up your fucking resentments and tell me why you don't want to get rid of them is exactly what the counselor said to me.
Hmm.
And, that made my step 4 go on a lot longer. But it got rid of the justification. And, um, the biggest one was that I was holding on to was not being able to forgive my parents and
Mhm.
growing up in an alcoholic household. Well, at the end of the day, they didn't put the bottle in my fucking mouth. Um, they didn't put it, yeah, it was always around, but they didn't make me drink it. I made that decision.
Mhm.
And, I just justified that for the longest time. And, um, a big one was the environment that I grew up in. I grew up in a road construction where everybody partied. And, right from the time I was born, right up through my teenage years, that was the environment that I grew up in. And it was all I knew. So I couldn't
Mhm.
blame anybody because it's all that I was around. And, um, that was the biggest one that I justified for a long time. I was able to let it go and I was able to make an amends to my mom and dad for it. So that, that was a loaded question. I don't like Mondays. Your turn.
Okie dokie. Could I have the topic again there? Baron von Boots.
Yeah.
I loved Mad Max, the wheelman. What you said there, though, I thought that was great. You might not like Mondays, but I think Mondays like you.
All right. So on the worst resentment that anybody can have is the one you feel justified to keep.
You
Can
know,
you?
this makes me think of kind of step 6 and step 7. Where you became ready for for the defects to be removed and these shortcomings.
Mhm.
and then you humbly ask to give them away. But it's like that to me revealed what I wasn't quite ready to let go of. You know,
Mhm.
like in theory, in the beginning, in my step four, I was like, yes, I'd love to be perfect. but, but that quickly is like, well, you have to stop this, and you have to stop that, and you have to stop this, and you have to stop that. And some of it's like, but I kind of like that one, you know, like, uh, it's funny, but one of the ones that was most wholeheartedly gotten rid of by me was the pity party. When I
Mhm.
saw how chaotically large of a pity party I had created my life to be, like I had friends that were specifically our our role was a combined pity party like ascension. You know, like I could
Mhm.
pity, he could party, he could pity, I could party, and then we would be like so piteous together that it was like nobody could be worse off than us two. And uh and that one I was happy to get rid of. But man, you know, try to get rid of all the dishonesty in your life. Like all of it.
Mhm.
All of it.
Mhm.
Like I mean, and even to be ready for that all to go. You know, like
Mhm.
man, that is like that is a really, really fine toothbrush you're scrubbing a massive mountain with to get rid of all dishonesty from every facet of your life. And that one I still feels like a work in progress. I still feel like I pick and choose what will hurt somebody or not.
Mm.
You know, and I don't think, you know, I think just like with amends, like you make some amends whether you're, you know, going to hurt people or not, but I don't think you share every aspect of the world or your world and experience with someone if you know full well it's going to hurt the other person, right? Like
Mhm.
some of that is just like pain spreading gossip, you know. And then at
Mhm.
that point, but you not saying it, does that make you dishonest? You know, like, and then you saying it, you're being hurtful. So it's like you're acting out in some defect in no matter which way you do it. Like there's some pretty confusing points inside this program that it's like things are laid out in a way like, you know, sometimes it's harm reduction versus harm elimination,
Mhm.
you know. But I definitely know for myself that there was really some things that I was like, whoa, I'm rationalizing this a lot. And my first sponsor was really good about that. He was like, rationalizing resentments, resentments and rationalizing. He's like, those are going to take you out, you know.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
uh, and it's because, you know, the whole point of this is for us to live presently. And if we're just sitting in resentments and sitting in rationalizing, you know, like resentments, first of all, are definitely not living in the present moment. But even that rationalizing, you're not living right now if you're rationalizing yesterday's actions or tomorrow's actions, you know. That's another way to destroy your conscious contact with your higher power. And I think I'm
Mhm.
leaving that there. Mr. Baron von Boots, what do you got to say about that one? I know you got something.
So the worst resentment that anybody can have is the one you feel justified to keep. Um, I think I kind of had a resentment against the program for a while in the beginning when it came to that mental health stuff. Um, because it made my recovery look a bit different than everybody else's. And there were certain things that other people could do that I couldn't really do. And I remember being terminally unique in that sense, right? Fatally hip terminally unique, where none of what other people say applies to me ever, right? And then realizing that that was a false that was a false belief. And that if I if I work the program to the best of my ability, I will get and stay clean, right? Uh, I think it was this way. I'm very, very grateful for the people that were around when I came into my recovery and the support they were able to give. Um, there's a lot of stigma that goes around with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So I was with people that supported me even though they might not have understood what I was going through. Right? Like there was a stint where I was like I've been in the psych ward more in recovery than I was in active addiction. It's just that's how my story works. So there was a time when I was in, and a very good friend of mine who we cleaned up at around the same time. He spun his wheels a little bit and wasn't always or doesn't have the same time as I do, but and he works a very solid, very strict program. Anyway, he was taking his B pressure welding at the college, and then right here, they're not close together, but they're pretty close together. The college and the hospital, and every day after class, he would come by with a coffee, and we would sit, maybe play some crib, and that support that he showed me is kind of knocked down some of those walls of being terminally unique, you know. And I mean, he didn't like force me to do step work or something along those lines. It was just friendship, and it made me realize that even though, like, say, step two, right, that could restore us to sanity, even though I maybe felt that, um, and it is different. It's different for me, right? That step means something different to me than the average addict, but it still has a definition for me. It still has a name, so I'm able to achieve it. It's just the way I would describe it is different. So that was a resentment against the fellowship that I had that got dropped because of the actions of the fellowship, right? Um, yeah, that's what I think of.
Love that. Oh,
I
it's
like.
great, man. Mad Max, the wheelman, do you have a question for me?
I do. Milan, step 10 Starcic. What spiritual principle can you practice today, such as compassion, humility, or willingness to loosen the grip of resentment in your life?
I know this one. It's well, I'd say like a combination because there's a point where they're very closely related, but tolerance and acceptance. When I
Mm,
went through my step work, that was one of the things that caused my disturbance in my life was I wasn't tolerant of other people as being the perfect individual of where they are right now. And I wasn't
mm,
accepting of their actions versus what I was expecting as a reaction
mhm,
to my actions.
mhm,
And and through the step work, I've really seen how damaging that is to people around you. Like to perpetually be expressed that what you're doing is wrong, or what you've done is wrong, or what you're thinking is wrong. Like it's just not, it's not a healthy thing to be around. And I don't want to be the purveyor of those kind of feelings or that kind of stunting of other people's souls anymore. So, it's something that I pray about all the time, and I feel that it is growing more in me, and that I'm able to like hold the tiger, if not eliminate the tiger. I'm like, well, just shut up right now. Like, I'd say to myself, be like, shut up. Like, that's not nice. That's not nice. Shut up. Yeah. So that for me, it's for sure. It's for sure that, and that's something that I work on surrendering all the time.
I
And
like it.
thanks. So that was a great question, man. I love that one.
Mr. Baron Von Boots. What spiritual principle can you practice today, such as compassion, humility, or willingness to loosen the grip of the resentment in your life?
Hmm. Compassion for both myself and my loved ones. Um, I think that compassion is the antidote to those expectations, in the
Yeah.
sense that I have I try really hard not to have expectations with people, but a few things went down last week, and the basic, if I were to distill it into something shorter, it would just be that there was under there was um some shit went down, and I bled on people that never cut me.
Ooh, pity party.
Yeah, and I had to feel compassion for myself in the sense of um forgiving myself for it, but I could only do that after the amends was made, because
Mm-hmm.
I was upset with myself, very upset with myself. And I think what happened was not about expect it was about expectations, but in a way that I've never thought of them before. So luckily the issue's been resolved, but there's still an aftermath, and I have to, and I am really practicing that uh, compassion for everybody that was involved. I know that's a bit vague. I don't really want to go into too much detail. It's a bit personal, but the bottom line is the program has given me the tools to resolve the issue, and a lot of that was through letting go. I didn't even let the resentments form. It was like Milan was saying, like you can. I've been around long enough that I can see resentments forming, and
Mm-hmm.
I was able to not develop them, and through this hard time. So that's really all I got for that one.
I like it. Well, I got an answer.
Yeah, you do. You love Mondays.
Love Mondays. Mondays are the best. Just some sarcasm there. Um, what spiritual principle can I practice to loosen the ties of a resentment? Um, I think humility, compassion, and willingness are all important. Um, but I think gratitude's important as well. And, you know, tolerance and being willing to practice all of those. Um, being tolerant with myself is the biggest one. Accepting that it's progress, not perfection, and that, I may not be where I want to be, but I'll be there at some point. And, that helps with that resentment with myself. And the compassion with others, accepting others, but, they're not in the same position as I am, especially when it comes to helping newcomers or um, people with less clean time than me. Um, you know, my recovery isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. Why should theirs be? Um, it's just accepting that this is a day by day program and that, there's going to be hurdles. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be leaps and bounds. It's life on life's terms. And, um, that was the one that I struggled with for a long time is, the life on life's terms. And I had a real good person that I looked up to that I still follow today and is actually a family friend. And um, he was a professional hockey player in the NHL, and his name was Theo Fleury. And, he did a documentary where he talked about life on life's terms. And, he had no idea how to deal with it. And it got to the point where he had a 45 in his mouth and he was ready to end it. And he had to remind himself about tolerance and the compassion and um that resulted in him not pulling the trigger and just to be able to deal with life on life's terms. I've had the opportunity to hear that man speak multiple times, and it still sends shivers through my body. And I listen to his documentary on a regular basis because it's that reminder that I need. And um, I think I'm not going to take away from all of the spiritual principles because I think they're all important. So I don't want to pick one or two. I need to practice all the spiritual principles in my life. And the main ones are, the acceptance, tolerance, and humility, and being humble with where I'm at because I know what it's like to have less. And, that's why it's making it easy to accept the if the truck gets repossessed or I have to sell the house, it's not if, it is happening. But I can still find humility in that because I've been, in a position in life where I never had those things and I've had less. So, it allows me to be able to continue on. So that's where I stand on that.
I love that. And so you asked that question.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So
Sure.
I got to ask a question here for the Baron. Baron, are you ready?
I am.
Okay. Living clean means we no longer allow resentment to dictate our behavior. We choose peace,
Mm.
even when pride protests. When was the last time pride kept you from experiencing peace?
Oof. Mm. It was a few weeks ago. I shared that, I dropped out of university again, and there was a whole lot of pride and ego tied up in being a student. Um, a whole lot of expectations on myself that I wasn't able to fulfill. Unrealistic expectations now, but even just admitting that they were possibly unrealistic expectations hurt my pride and ego.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the process of coming to realize that I wouldn't finish the course, um, it also meant that I wouldn't be getting that degree, which is something that I've wanted for a long time. But, and there's a big but there, when I was able to let go of that pride and ego, I felt that peace. I felt relief and I felt peace. And new opportunities are presenting themselves, which uh, which are actually really exciting, right? Um, not getting the degree was like, okay, this is I don't know if this is gonna make sense. It makes sense to me. I don't know if any of you have ever played sports, uh, especially you like semi-competitively in the sense that I played university football for a little bit, not too long, but a little bit. And there came a point when in playing I realized like, I'm never gonna make the CFL, or I'm never gonna make. I mean, I knew I would never make the NFL because those guys are just fucking crazy. But I was like, I'll never make the CFL. I'll never play university ball again. I'll never be professional at this stuff because as a child, I found probably a bit of escapism, but a little bit of, um, I mean, that fantasy, right? Like hitting, you're two strikes in. It's the bottom of the ninth. It's the World Series. And then you realize that I'm never going to play baseball professionally or even semi-professionally. So there's that letdown. That's a similar letdown that I experienced when I was realized that formal education in that sense is never going to fit for me. So that was a long-standing issue that I've had like throughout my entire recovery. Um, but the future is actually looking really bright once I was able to let go of that. So like I'm applying for a trade. I think it's going to be very interesting and good for me. Um, I'm in I've been put into a financial situation, also lean times over here as well. But I've been put into a financial situation that is going to make me step my game up. And I have ego in the way there. It's a reverse ego, right? Because like a lot of people think of ego as being too puffed up on false pride, which it definitely is. But the ego is also the same one that tells you you're a piece of shit that's never going to amount to anything. Those are
Hmm.
both ego, right?
Yeah.
So, it's that side of ego is making the adjustment difficult. But that's the only thing in my way. Like, I'm the only thing in my way.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's like for me, I think a lot of it when it comes to my ego is about whether or not I'm spiritually fit. I think when I'm spiritually fit, I don't have much of an ego. Like when I'm spiritually fit, I'm right sized. If that makes any sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that's the last time pride really fucked with me.
I love that.
It's pretty
And
fresh.
Mad Max, the wheelman. Living clean means we no longer allow resentments to dictate our behavior. We choose peace even when pride protests. When was the last time pride kept you from experiencing peace?
I think in this recent situation that I've been going through, I shared about it in one of the first questions there about my pride and ego getting in the way for me talking about my situation and, allowing me to sit in it for what was too long. And, um, when I started to put that pride aside and, realize that I did let certain people down and it is what it is, it allowed me to feel some freedom from it and be able to open my mind and, my heart to some different options and, allow people to help me. And, I wouldn't have got to this spot that I'm at now on these decisions that I've made to move forward if I wouldn't have let those people in to help me. And, I can already feel the little bit of freedom from just making that decision.
Mhm.
And I know there's going to be a whole lot more freedom once this situation is dealt with. And, I have to remind myself not to be my own worst enemy. Um, because my worst defect is I'm my own worst critic. I
Mhm.
beat myself up
Mhm.
the most before anybody does.
Mhm. Mhm.
And, that's when like when people, are quick to jump down my throat, it gets me upset and a little bit of anger because, well before they're jumping down my throat, I've already jumped down my own throat. I've already beat myself up multiple times before it gets to the point that other people do it. And, it's just like when it gets to the point other people doing it, it almost feels like you're being kicked while you're down because you've already beat yourself up to the point that you're on the ground. And then when other people do it, it just feels like that kick. So, I have to remind myself of that feeling that comes when I let my pride get in the way and my ego get in the way and, not allow people in to help. And, I've been around this program long enough that I should be able to let people in and talk about things, but, it's,
That sounds like an expectation.
yeah,
Ooh.
it sure does. Yeah.
BVB, dropping them in the pan.
Fuck Monday. That's the expectation. Um, and that's one that I have to be careful on. It's it can happen quite a bit. So yeah, that's all I got. Baron von
Awesome.
Boots called me out.
I hope I didn't offend you with that. I'm really sorry.
Oh, look at here. Step 10 in action.
It just kind of came out of my mouth. I wasn't really.
Okay, so step 10 Starcic. Living clean means we no longer allow resentments to dictate our behavior. We choose peace even when pride protests. When was the last time pride kept you from experiencing peace? It was as close as yesterday. It was yesterday. We had a tenant that moved out of a place we're trying to sell. This lady had the pissiest cat in the fucking world. And literally, people came and looked at our place to buy it and said, "No, no, the cat piss smell is too much." And it's not even us; it's our tenant. Like she's literally blocking our sale, and so I'm having a resentment about that. And then she moves out, and then it's still smelling like cat piss, and I got to go clean that up yesterday. And I'm like on my way there. I'm like, I don't deserve this. This isn't my fucking mess. This is not my fucking cat. Blah blah blah. Fucking all this that, and like ultimately, I stopped at the fucking dollar store for some cleaner. I had a wonderful conversation with this guy from Mexico in Spanish. It was fun. I showed up. I played music the entire time I mopped and cleaned and mopped and cleaned. And then I went and got my father in law some whipped cream for some fresh strawberry shortcake I was having at home. Boy, poor Milan. Poor Milan and his horrible day, you know? But I deserved so much better, you know? And man, like I remember, like I literally remember unloading the mop bucket there, and I'm like, I'm ruining my own fucking day right now. Like I'm saying that to myself. I'm like, she doesn't care. My cousin who I own the house, who isn't here cleaning it in Ontario, he doesn't care. The rest of my family's at home making the strawberry shortcake stuff. They're having the time of their lives because they're making us all a treat, And I'm like, this is just stupid. So I saw the other tenant, and I'm like, hey, none of you guys are, because they work night shifts, the other tenants, and I'm like, none of you guys are on night shift sleeping right now. And she's like, nope. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play some music, turn my mind frame around here. But it was totally my pride in that it was like, I don't deserve to do this, you know and then slipping myself into like my own pity party where it was like me and myself. Nice pity, Milan. Yes, yes, why don't we feel sorry for ourselves?" And it was like, and it was all done in under an hour, and I was just whining for nothing in my head. And yeah, so that was mine for yesterday. And what about you, Baron von Boots? Oh, that was me who asked those ones. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I lost my place in the question. Do you got another
Okay.
Do you got another topic there, Baron?
No, I'm fresh out.
Okay, okay. What about you, Mad Max, the wheelman?
I'm fresh up.
Okay, so why don't we now go into lightning round with the remainder questions I got? Everybody
Sounds
ready
good
for
to
that?
me.
Okay, so just let me pull up. Now entering lightning round. We're 1 minute on the clock, and it's like recover or die. What part of your story are you ready to take ownership of instead of resenting, Baron?
Oh, holy fuck.
Happy Monday.
I
Take a deep breath.
hmm,
Do, do.
chores.
Yes.
Fucking so I'm a government assistant. I only work part-time, and my wife works a full-time job. Not overly demanding, but a pretty solid. You know, she's tired when she's done work, and I didn't have a full out resentment. I'm gonna go over time just because it took me so long to fucking answer.
Okay.
Um, uh, so I didn't have a full on resentment. It was developing, just on the idea of um, I'm lazy and I don't like to do housework, and it was creating an unfair situation where she was burdened more than I was in doing housework, but she's working full time and I'm not. So there's definitely, and I can't speak for her, but she had a bit of a resentment about it too, right? And then I realized that um, this isn't about me having this isn't it's an opportunity to serve instead of complain, basically. And it changed my mindset a little more than a little bit. And I've realized that, you know, when she makes a to-do list, it's not to control me, it's not to force me to do anything. It's that if I do these things, her life will be better. So it's an opportunity for service.
Nice. Okay. Mad Max, the Wheelman. Uh, what part of your story are you ready to take ownership of instead of resenting?
The Monday continues.
That's right. Funner than a Sunday. We got a Monday.
Oh, I think it's just taking ownership on the financial decisions that I made. I know I've talked about it a lot, but it's literally the biggest thing that's affecting my recovery today. And, just taking ownership of it. And, I did it. It happened. And now I got to face it. And the biggest part I was struggling was making the phone calls to deal with it because I fucking hate admitting that I fuck up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and to call these people, and essentially you're calling somebody with your tail between your legs saying, "Hey, I can't do this anymore." Um, but I did it and I took ownership for it, and now it's being dealt with. But it was finding that initial, you know, I almost had to let it get to the point where, um, it had bugged me so much that it was really causing a big resentment, and um, you know, to the point where it was going to get even worse. And that's what it took to make the phone calls. But
Mm-hmm.
it was still doing that. I know I went over time, but it wasn't going to make sense if I didn't.
It's all good, man. I love that. I really love you guys, and these podcasts. I think are great for us to throw our shit out there and look at it from a different angle, and it always helps me grow. Like I'm in the same boat, slightly different than you, Kyle, and so like I really had to come to terms back in March. I called like what do you call it? Bankruptcy people. I called like accountants about this. I went
Mhm.
through the whole thing, and that those aren't fun conversations.
No,
Hi,
no, no.
I'm
Yeah.
fucked, and I got a good chance of
Yeah.
being fucked her. Like, but you know, like the thing about it is, though, I gotta say, is that I honestly now would rather start from scratch than continue with the burden of the debt. You know,
Yeah.
like like it just gets to a point where, man, you can work so hard climbing and you're still falling backwards. And that
Yeah.
and that to me is like, I'm happy to be a person who has to clear his debts. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that in a short-term only format, it becomes very, very disillusioning. You know, like you're like, whoa, like, man, I'm getting nowhere and I'm getting worse, and that's just not a great place to be. Okay, Baron, what did you discover about yourself last time you examined a deep resentment?
Mm, that um so that I was a good son.
Nice.
Um I got um yeah, so there was part of my extended family um passed away, and under the circumstances that there was uh they were mistreated at the end of their life. Uh and it really brought me back to my dad at the end of his life. Um
Hmm.
and my dad was in very, very rough shape at the end of his life. He couldn't speak anymore.
Mm,
He was bedridden, right? He had bed sores. It was just not a he was not doing well. And there's I've struggled dealing with that pain, um mainly in I haven't been able to cry about it. Uh and last week, amongst everything that was going on, this happened, and there's a there's a song by James Blunt called "Monsters." I don't know if you guys have ever heard it.
nope.
Uh, um, and it's a very beautifully and poignantly written song about a son saying goodbye to his father who's on his deathbed. And I was able to shed some tears for the first time in a long time. And I realized that, uh, when I take a step back and look at things from a more objective point of view with my relationship with him, that I provided I provided him with a better quality of life, and um, he didn't die alone.
Nice.
So I realized that, objectively speaking, I was the best son I could be, regardless of my emotions and thoughts around it. I did okay. You
Love
know,
that.
I'd say that's it.
Love it.
Love it too. Wheelman, what did you discover about yourself the last time you examined a deep resentment?
Oh, that is a good one. Um, I think the biggest thing I discovered was, it don't matter how much clean time I got or how well my recovery is, I can still go through some fucked up situations and get myself into my mess. Um, I talked to my sponsor about it, and he was like, the way he put it to me, he's like, just because you're clean and you're not in active addiction yet doesn't mean it can't happen to you. And the way he put it to me was he listed off divorce, bankruptcy, loss of job, loss of, death of a loved one. And he said, just put yet on the end. And, it can happen to anyone. And that's what I had to come to, acceptance with. Just because I got almost 10 and a half years clean doesn't mean that I can face a potential bankruptcy or repossession or anything like that. You know, this program allows me and teaches me how to deal with these situations, but it doesn't make me untouchable. So that's what
Mm.
I realized. So
Mhm.
I love that, man. Thank you for sharing that, brother. So, what did I discover about myself the last time I examined a deep resentment? Well, I really think it's kind of one of the things that goes back to for me. Oh, sorry, push start. One of the things that goes back to for me is how I just was really trying to fight some of my defects on my own and not surrendering them,
Mm.
and it was, that I have to. For me, surrender is something that I need to vocalize every single day in my prayers. Like, and if I don't, my ego is more than happy to try to run the show on my defects. And, uh, and so what it taught me though, by looking at myself through that resentment that occurred, was that I am a work in progress. And that, if I stop and really kind of do an inventory of who I am versus who I was 20 months ago.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of change. Like there's been a lot of change, and I'm not saying that like I'm saying that to prop my ego up. But what I'm saying is that sometimes you need to stop shitting on yourself. And the only way to stop shitting on yourself is to actually have an honest inventory of who you are versus who you were, because
Mhm.
chances are you'll be surprised how different you are than what you were, when you
Mhm.
first arrived. And even, for me, there's been just pivotal moments. Like I can just think of implementing different things, and I know which month it was. Like, I call the great resurrendering of March 2025 for me, and it has been a real change in how I look at surrendering. Sorry, I went way over there, and it's all right. Seems like we all had something to say on that question. That one was an almost impossible to be short question, eh?
yeah,
Okay, so here we go. This one's a real tricky one. And this will be the last one here. What expectation of someone are you willing to surrender in order to find relief, Baron? Baron?
Um,
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you heard
so
me.
yeah, I just sorry.
You were checking
Um,
out the other direction. I was like, is he gone?
so for first, I just want to say, if being hard on myself worked, it would have worked a long time ago.
Yeah.
yeah,
Whoa, love that.
Second would be, I think that I my I'd say it has to do with the relationship I have with my mother. Um, in going through what I'm going through especially last week, um, we we still struggle. I still struggle, and I assume she does, on family roles, right? Like when I was in active addiction, and for parts of my recovery, uh, we, especially not living in the same area, our family roles have kind of been ingrained into certain things. Uh, like she has expectations on me about how I should live my life, and I have expectations on how she should be a parent, and sometimes those don't always match up. But um, I really feel like, uh, despite a lot of shit, she still has my back. even though if she expresses it in a way that I find uncomfortable. So I'm willing to let go of my preconceived notions of how things should be and just deal with what's going on in the today.
I love that. Okie dokie. Wheelman, here we go. What expectation of someone are you willing to surrender in order to find relief?
I really like what Scotty said about, hurting ourselves and beating ourselves up is never gonna, it's never gonna solve it. It doesn't matter how hard we beat ourselves up. I needed to hear that. The more I think about this question, the biggest one I had was, when my dad got diagnosed with cancer and setting an expectation on how much time we had left. And when it really, became a reality and, we were given 8 to 10 months and, I'm phoning to say my goodbyes a week later. And, that's the biggest one because, me and mom were both had expectations, that we had 8 to 10 months left. And he, God had other plans. And, I was able to have a phone call with my mom while she was by my dad's side, and I was able to, let my dad know that it's okay, it's okay to go. And 6 hours later, he was called home, and if I didn't make that phone call, I don't know, where I would be or how I would, be dealing with it. And it just brought some acceptance to the situation. No, none of us are ever ready to lose a loved one, but especially my dad. But it made the situation a lot easier when, I let him know that, I was going to take care of mom and be the man of the house now and, that he can move on. And, that's exactly what happened. So that was the biggest expectation in the last few years. So.
I love that, brother. I appreciate you sharing that. What expectation of someone am I willing to surrender in order to find relief? You know, for me, the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that question is my daughter. Um, I feel that the expectations and the intolerance and the lack of acceptance that I experienced in my addiction, which was pretty much most of all of her childhood life to now, um, really might have damaged her own personal growth and her own confidence in herself. Just and so now I'm really trying not to have expectations of who she should be, what she should want, how she's living her life, and it's working out much for the better. And I'm really hoping that praying for the strength to continue on with that because that's it's helping change things in a way that I'm really grateful for. Man, today was amazing. Thanks for Mad Max, the wheelman, for jumping in here with Baron Von Boots and I. And so you've never seen it, but on Mondays, the way that we end is the Baron has a joke, and then we say goodbye to everybody after. So, Baron, you've got a joke for us today.
I do.
Good.
Milan, uh,
Yeah.
why did the duck go to Narcotics Anonymous?
Why does the duck go to Narcotics Anonymous?
He was addicted to quack.
Tune in next episode for more recovery fun. Bye bye, everybody. Please help us help others. If you've liked what you've seen here today, please subscribe and share this podcast and help us get to 100 followers. We're looking for interaction with our audience. So please email recoveryfreedomrising@gmail.com or contact Milan South Okanagan Starcic on Facebook with questions, topic suggestions, or just comments. We'd love to hear from you.